You know, we always assume that technology is there to protect us. We buy the cameras, we install the smart locks, and we link everything to our phones because it makes us feel like we're in control. I was the same way. I lived in one of those hypermodern apartment complexes in downtown Chicago, the kind with keyless entry, voice-activated lights, and security shutters that you could control from halfway across the world. It felt like a fortress. But nobody tells you what happens to a fortress when the power dies. It was late November, a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly because the wind was howling against the glass so hard I thought the windows might actually crack. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, waiting for a pizza I'd ordered an hour ago. The TV was playing some mindless sitcom in the background, just noise to fill the empty space of the apartment. I lived alone, and usually I liked the quiet, but that night the atmosphere felt heavy. At 9:15 p.m., the world just stopped. It didn't flicker. There was no warning. It was just an instant, oppressive plunge into absolute black. The TV cut out, the hum of the refrigerator died, and the little LEDs on the router vanished. It was so sudden that my eyes actually hurt, straining to find any scrap of light. I sat there frozen for a second, waiting for the backup generators to kick in. This was a luxury building. Surely the hallway lights would buzz on in a moment. But 10 seconds passed, then 30, then a full minute. Nothing, just the sound of the wind screaming outside. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dust motes in the air, casting long, dancing shadows against the minimalist white walls. I walked to the window and looked out. The entire city block was gone. No streetlights, no traffic signals, no glow from the buildings opposite mine. It was a total grid failure. I let out a sigh, annoyed more than anything. I had 12% battery left on my phone. Great. I decided to head to the kitchen to find some candles I kept in the junk drawer. You know, the one full of rubber bands, takeout menus, and batteries you aren't sure work. As I was rummaging through the drawer, the silence of the apartment started to get to me. Without the hum of the HVAC or the appliances, the silence felt thick. It felt like it had weight. And that's when I heard the sound. Click, whir, clunk. It came from the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, my hand gripping a half-melted vanilla candle. That sound. I knew that sound. It was the smart lock. In my building, the electronic locks were designed with a fail-safe feature. In the event of a total power loss and a failure of the building's backup battery, the locks were designed to disengage. It's a fire safety regulation, so people don't get trapped inside during an emergency. But what it effectively meant was that the heavy, steel-reinforced door to my apartment, which usually required a key fob and a passcode, was now unlocked. It was just sitting there, unlatched. I stood in the kitchen, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. It's fine, I told myself. It's just the mechanism releasing. Nobody is out there. But then I heard the second sound. The heavy fire door at the end of the hallway, the one that leads to the stairwell, creaked open. It's a heavy door. It drags against the carpet if you don't push it hard. Scrrrap. Then the heavy thud as it closed. Someone was on my floor. Now look, I'm a rational guy. My brain immediately went to, it's a neighbor. They're checking the fuse box. Maybe it's the delivery guy with the pizza. But I didn't call out. Something in my gut, that primal lizard brain we all have but ignore, told me to shut up. I killed the light on my phone. The apartment plunged back into darkness. I was standing in the middle of the kitchen, gripping the countertop so hard my knuckles ached. I listened. Footsteps. They weren't the hurried, confused footsteps of a neighbor looking for answers. They were slow, deliberate, heavy boots on the low-pile carpet of the corridor. Step, pause. They were stopping at every door. I held my breath, my lungs burning. I could visualize the hallway. There were 4 units on my floor. Mine was the last one at the end of the corridor. I heard the faint sound of a handle being tried, Unit 401. Then a pause, then footsteps again. Step. Unit 402. I heard the handle rattle, this time a low, muffled voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone. It was angry. It sounded like a growl. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a neighbor. This was someone who knew the building's systems. Someone who knew the power was out and knew exactly what that meant for the locks. I needed to hide. The bedroom was too far. I'd have to cross the living room, and if they opened the door, the ambient light from the window might silhouette me. The bathroom. No lock on the door, just a flimsy privacy latch. The pantry. It was right next to me, a narrow closet for dry goods. I stepped inside, moving as slowly as I physically could, terrified that the floorboards would squeak. I pulled the door shut, leaving just the tiniest crack so I didn't suffocate. I sat on the floor, wedged between a case of water and a bag of dog food, even though I didn't have a dog anymore. I clutched my phone to my chest, praying it wouldn't ring. I remembered the ringer was on. With trembling fingers, I fumbled blindly to flip the mute switch on the side. Clicking. The sound seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silence. I froze. From the hallway, nothing, the footsteps had stopped. Had they heard me? I sat there for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. Sweat was trickling down my back, cold and clammy. Then right outside my apartment door, the handle turned. It didn't rattle, it turned slowly, smoothly. The failsafe worked perfectly. The latch clicked and the door creaked open. A draft of cold air from the hallway drifted into the apartment. I could smell it from the pantry, the smell of wet wool and something else. Something metallic, like old copper coins. They were inside. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. Don't breathe, I told myself. Do not breathe. A beam of light swept across the living room. I could see it through the crack in the pantry door, a high-powered tactical flashlight, the kind that cuts through the dark like a physical object. The beam hit the couch, the TV, the walls. Hello. The voice was terrifyingly normal. It was a man's voice, calm, almost polite. Is anyone home? I'm with maintenance. We're checking the breakers. For a split second, relief washed over me. Maintenance, of course. But then I saw the boots. The pantry door crack was low, near the floor. As the figure walked past the kitchen entrance, I saw dirty, heavy combat boots. They were caked in mud. Our building maintenance crew wore blue disposable booties or clean sneakers, and they certainly didn't walk around in the dark with a tactical light asking if anyone was home. They had keys. They would have knocked. This man was hunting. He moved into the living room. I heard him dragging his hand along the wall. I know you're in here, he whispered. The polite facade dropped instantly. I saw the light from your phone before you turned it off. My stomach dropped. He had been watching from the street. He had been waiting for the blackout, or maybe he caused it. He started tearing the place apart. I heard the couch cushions being ripped off. He swept the items off the coffee table, glass shattered on the floor. He wasn't stealing. He wasn't looking for valuables. He was looking for me. He moved to the bedroom. I heard the closet door slide open violently. Bang, bang. Come out, he sang, a low, tuneless melody. He was coming back toward the kitchen. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was a sitting duck. If he opened this pantry door, I was dead. I had nothing to defend myself with. A can of soup, a roll of paper towels. The footsteps stopped right in front of the pantry. I could see the flashlight beam hitting the floorboards inches from my face. I could hear his breathing. It was wet, rattled, like he had a cold. He stood there for an eternity. He knew he had to know. His hand touched the doorknob of the pantry. I saw the shadow of his fingers stretch across the floor. I tightened every muscle in my body, preparing to kick, to scream, to do anything. And then, beep. A piercing electronic chirp echoed through the apartment. Then another beep. The refrigerator compressor kicked on with a loud hum. The microwave light flashed 12:00. The overhead recessed lights in the kitchen blazed to life, flooding the room with blinding, artificial brightness. The power was back. I heard a sharp curse from the other side of the door. Damn it. The footsteps scrambled. He didn't walk, he ran. I heard the front door slam open, then heavy boots sprinting down the hallway. I didn't move. I couldn't. I sat in that pantry, bathed in the light seeping under the door, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I sat there for 20 minutes, waiting for him to come back, waiting for the lights to cut out again. When I finally worked up the courage to push the door open, the apartment was empty, but he had left a message. On my dining table, arranged perfectly in the center, was my kitchen knife, the big chef's knife from the block on the counter. And next to it, carved into the polished wood of the table, were 2 words. Next time. I moved out the next morning, broke my lease, paid the penalty, and left my furniture behind. I didn't care. I moved to a ground floor place in a busy neighborhood with old-fashioned deadbolts that require a physical key. But sometimes when it storms and the lights flicker just for a second, I freeze. I stare at the door, and I wonder if he's still out there, watching the grid, waiting for the lights to go out again. People think hospitals are the safest places to be. They think they are fortresses of logic, science, and order. And usually they are. But I've been a night shift nurse for 12 years, and I can tell you that at 3 a.m. when the corridors are empty and the only sound is the rhythmic hissing of ventilators, a hospital changes. It stops being a place of healing and starts feeling like a holding pen for death. 3 years ago, I was working the graveyard shift at a state facility just outside of Seattle. I worked in the High Observation Wing, Unit 4. We called it the Red Zone. This wasn't for your standard post-op recovery. This was for patients who were a danger to themselves or others. Severe psychosis, violent outbursts, criminal insanity transfers. The heavy stuff. It was a particularly brutal night for weather. A massive Pacific storm was hammering the coast. We could hear the rain lashing against the reinforced windows like handfuls of gravel. But inside, everything was sterile and white and controlled. At 2:45 a.m., I was at the nurse's station with my coworker, David. We were doing the usual chart updates, sipping lukewarm coffee. "Lights are flickering," David muttered, looking up at the fluorescent strips buzzing overhead. "Just the wind," I said, not looking up from my screen. "The generators here are monsters. Even if the grid goes, we won't notice." I was wrong. At 2:47 a.m., the thunder cracked so loud it shook the floor beneath my feet. And then, the impossible happened. The world went black. It wasn't just the lights. It was the sound. In a hospital, you never realize how loud the silence is until the machines stop. The hum of the air scrubbers, the beeping of the heart monitors, the buzz of the computers, it all died instantly. "David," I whispered. The darkness was absolute. "I'm here," he said, his voice sounding small. "Generators should be kicking in. Give it 10 seconds. We waited 10 seconds, 20. Nothing happened. No hum of the backup diesel engines. No emergency lighting. Just the sound of the rain and the wind screaming outside. Then the screaming started inside. In Unit 4, the doors are magnetic. They require power to stay sealed. Now, theoretically, there are fail-safes. If the power cuts, the bolts are supposed to stay thrown, mechanically locking the patients inside until a manual override is used. It's a safety protocol for us, the staff. But as I stood there in the pitch black, gripping the edge of the desk, I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. Clag, clag, clag. It was the sound of magnetic seals disengaging down the hallway. "Did you hear that?" David hissed. I could hear him fumbling for his flashlight. "The mag locks," I choked out. "David, the system reset. It didn't fail secure, it failed open." A beam of light cut through the dark as David got his flashlight working. He swept it down the hallway. The High Observation Wing is a long, T-shaped corridor. There are 12 rooms. As the beam of light traveled down the hall, I saw it. Door number 3 was drifting open. Door number 5 was already ajar. "Oh God," David said. We had 12 patients on the unit that night. 2 were heavily sedated. The other 10 were volatile. And one of them in room 8 was a man named Elias. Elias was a transfer from a maximum security prison. He had bitten a guard's ear off 2 weeks prior. He was 64, 300 pounds, and completely detached from reality. "We need to secure the doors," I said, my training trying to override my panic. We have to manually engage the deadbolts. I'll take the left wing, David said, his hand shaking as he held the light. You take the right, be fast. He handed me his spare penlight, a tiny, weak little thing that barely threw a beam 3 feet in front of me. I stepped out from behind the safety of the station. The air in the hallway was already changing. It smelled different without the ventilation running. It smelled like unwashed bodies and stale food. I moved to room 1. The door was cracked open. I shoved it shut and threw the manual deadbolt. Click, 1 down. I moved to room 2. The patient, an elderly woman with dementia, was sitting up in bed, giggling in the dark. Who turned out the sun? She asked. It's okay, sleep time now, I whispered, closing the door and locking it. Then I got to room 4. The door was wide open. The bed was empty. I shone my tiny penlight around the room. The sheets were thrown back. The bathroom door was open. Nothing. I stepped back into the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. A patient was loose, in the dark. David, I called out. No answer from the left wing. David, I yelled louder. Silence, just the rain. Then I heard wet footsteps, slap, 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 bare feet on linoleum. They were coming from the intersection of the T hallway, right where David had gone. I pointed my pathetic little light toward the darkness. David, is that you? A laugh echoed down the corridor. It wasn't David. It was a low, guttural, wet sound. I spun around, intending to run back to the nurse's station, lock myself in the med room, and call the police on my cell. But as I turned, I saw a shape standing right in front of me. It was Elias. He was looming over me, massive in the darkness. My penlight beam hit his chest. He was wearing his hospital gown, but it was ripped at the shoulder. I slowly, trembling, moved the light up to his face. He was smiling. His eyes were wide, pupils blown out so large they looked like black holes. The buzzing stopped, he whispered. His voice was surprisingly gentle. The bees in the walls, they finally went to sleep. I couldn't breathe. I was backed against the wall. He was close enough that I could smell the metallic tang of iron on his breath. Elias, I stammered, trying to use my therapeutic voice. You need to go back to your room. It's not safe out here. He leaned in closer. He reached out a hand the size of a shovel, and touched my face. His fingers were cold. It's never safe, he said. That's the secret. The lights just lie to you. Suddenly, from down the hall, a scream tore through the air. It was David. Elias' head snapped toward the sound. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of animalistic curiosity. Something is hurt, Elias said. He turned away from me and began walking toward David's scream. He didn't run, he stalked. I didn't wait, I bolted. I ran the opposite direction, toward the fire exit at the end of the right wing. I hit the crash bar, praying it wasn't maglock too. It gave way with a loud screech. I burst into the stairwell, the cold, damp air from the unheated concrete stairs hitting me in the face. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, sobbing as I scrambled down the stairs in the dark. It took the police 12 minutes to arrive. It took the power company another hour to get the grid back up. When the lights finally buzzed back on, that harsh, blinding fluorescent glare, I was sitting in the back of an ambulance wrapped in a shock blanket. They found David in room 10. He was unconscious, beaten badly, but alive. A patient from the left wing had ambushed him in the dark. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was where they found Elias. He was sitting in the nurse's station, in my chair. He was holding the phone receiver to his ear, listening to the dial tone. When they reviewed the security footage, because the cameras were on a separate battery backup that actually worked, they saw what happened after I ran. Elias hadn't gone to hurt David. He had walked past the room where David was being attacked. He had walked right past the chaos, the violence, the blood. He walked to the station, sat down and watched. He just watched. On the footage, you can see his eyes glowing in the infrared night vision of the camera. He stares directly at the lens for 45 minutes. At one point, he holds up a piece of paper to the camera. I saw that paper later. It was a page torn from a medical chart. He had drawn a picture in crayon. It was a drawing of a stick figure nurse with a flashlight. And behind the nurse, filling the entire page, was a giant, black scribbled monster with 100 eyes. Underneath, in shaky block letters, he had written, "SHE, see the others." I resigned the next day. I work in a dermatologist's office now, 9 to 5, no nights, and if the power goes out, we just go home. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment and I turn off the bedside lamp, I hesitate. I find myself waiting for my eyes to adjust, terrified that if I look too closely into the corners of the room, I'll see what Elias saw. I'll see the things that the lights are hiding. If you live in London, you know the unspoken rules of the tube. You don't make eye contact. You don't speak to strangers. And you pretend that being hurtled through a Victorian sewer pipe 60 meters underground at 40 miles an hour is a completely normal human activity. I take the Northern Line every day. It's the deepest, dirtiest, hottest line on the network. They call it the misery line for a reason. But you get used to it. You get used to the screech of the wheels, the smell of burnt rubber and stale sweat, and the flickering lights. It was a Friday evening, just after rush hour. The car wasn't packed, but it was busy. I was sitting near the end of the carriage, jamming my knees against the glass partition, trying to read a book on my Kindle. Across from me was a guy in an expensive gray suit tapping furiously on a phone that definitely didn't have a signal. Further down, a group of teenagers were laughing too loudly, and an old woman was clutching her shopping bags like they contained the crown jewels. We had just left Angel Station, heading south toward King's Cross. It's a long stretch of tunnel, deep. The train was moving fast, rocking side to side when the brakes slammed on. It wasn't a gradual slowdown. It was a violent, screeching halt that threw everyone forward. The teenager's speaker skittered across the floor. The suit guy dropped his phone. We sat there for a moment, waiting for the driver's apology. Usually it's "Ladies and gentlemen, we are being held at a red signal." We waited. The speaker crackled, but no voice came through, just static. Then the lights went out. It wasn't like a house power cut. In the deep tunnels, there is no ambient light, no street lamps, no moon. When the carriage lights died, it was like being buried alive. The blackness was physical. It felt like velvet wrapped around your face. "Bloody hell," someone muttered in the dark. A few phone flashlights clicked on, cutting jagged beams through the gloom. The air conditioning had died with the power, and instantly the temperature began to rise. The Northern Line is hot on a good day, but without ventilation, it becomes an oven within minutes. I checked my watch, 7:14 p.m. "Probably just a fuse," the suit guy said loud enough for everyone to hear. He sounded annoyed, not scared. "I'm going to be late for dinner." We sat there for 20 minutes. The heat became stifling. The air started to taste thick, recycled, like we were breathing each other's panic. The silence of the tunnel outside was heavy. Usually you can hear other trains, the rumble of the network, but there was nothing, just the tick-tick-tick of the cooling metal. At 7:45 p.m., the driver's door at the front of our carriage opened. A beam of light swung out. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a high-vis vest, walked into the passenger area. He looked sweaty, and he looked shaken. "Folks," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "radio is down. Power is down on the third rail. I need to walk to the rear cab to try the emergency override." "Why not just walk the tunnel to the station?" the suit guy demanded. "It can't be far." The driver shone his light right in the guy's face. "Sir, you do not leave the train. Do you understand? Under no circumstances do you open those doors. The third rail might be dead, or it might just be surging. You step out there, you fry." The driver hurried past us, moving to the next carriage. He locked the connecting door behind him. We were alone again. Another hour passed. It was now nearly 9:00 p.m. The heat was unbearable. The old woman was weeping softly. The teenagers had stopped laughing. They were huddled together, illuminated by the dying glow of their screens. I was staring out the window. My reflection was a ghostly pale smudge against the black glass, but past my reflection, out in the tunnel, I thought I saw movement. It was just a shift in the darkness, a shadow darker than the rest. "Did you see that?" the girl next to me whispered. She was young, maybe 20, wearing a nursing uniform. "See what?" "Outside, by the cables on the wall." I squinted. "It's just your eyes playing tricks, sensory deprivation." "No," she shook her head. "Something moved." Suddenly, a loud thud shook the carriage. It came from the roof. Everyone froze. We all looked up at the curved white ceiling of the train. SCRAAP. Something heavy was dragging itself along the top of the train car. It sounded like metal on metal, but softer, like wet leather dragging across steel. "Is that the driver?" someone whispered. "The driver is inside," I said, my voice barely a croak. He walked to the back. The scratching stopped right above us, then silence. The suit guy stood up. He was sweating through his shirt. "I'm not doing this," he snapped. "I'm suffocating in here. I'm not dying in a tin can because of a signal failure." He moved to the doors. "Don't," I yelled. The driver said. "Screw the driver." He grabbed the emergency release handle. "There's a walkway right there. I can see it. I'm walking to King's Cross." He yanked the handle. The pneumatic hiss was deafening in the quiet. The doors didn't open fully, but they lost their pressure. He dug his fingers into the rubber seal and heaved. The door slid open about 2 feet. The smell hit us first. It wasn't the smell of ozone or rats. It smelled like rot, like wet earth and old meat. "Jesus," the suit guy coughed, covering his nose. He leaned out of the gap, shining his phone light down the tunnel. "See," he said, his voice echoing. "It's clear. I can see the lights of the station way down there. It's just a 10-minute walk." He squeezed through the gap. He stepped onto the narrow maintenance walkway that runs alongside the tracks. "Sir, please come back in," the nurse pleaded. "Stay there if you want," he called back. "I'm getting a drink." We watched him walk away. His phone light bobbed in the darkness, getting smaller and smaller. We all crowded the window, watching him go, secretly wishing we had the guts to join him. He got maybe 50 yards away. Then he stopped. We saw his light freeze. "What is he doing?" the teenager asked. The suit guy was standing perfectly still. Then slowly, he turned his head to the left, looking at the arched wall of the tunnel. He started to back up. "He sees something," I whispered. He was backing up fast now, stumbling. He swung his light frantically at the wall. And then we saw it. In the spill of his flashlight, something detached itself from the tunnel wall. It was the same color as the soot-stained bricks, gray and black. It was long, too long to be a man. It moved with a jerky, insect-like scuttle, but it was the size of a person. It dropped from the wall onto the walkway, blocking his path to the station. The suit guy screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was a scream of pure primal horror. He spun around and started sprinting back toward the train. "Open the door," he shrieked. "Open the door." "Help him," the nurse yelled. I lunged for the gap in the doors. I grabbed the rubber edges and tried to widen it. He was running, his eyes wide, his face a mask of terror. Behind him, the thing was moving. It didn't run. It flowed. It moved along the ground on 4 limbs, low and fast like a spider. "Help me," he screamed. He was 10 feet away, 5 feet. He reached out his hand toward the open door. I reached out mine. I felt his fingertips brush against me. And then something wrapped around his ankle. It was a pale gray limb, wet, elongated. He didn't even have time to cry out again. He was yanked down, instantaneously. 1 second he was there, reaching for safety, and the next he was gone, pulled under the walkway into the recess beneath the cables. There was a sickening crunch, then the sound of wet tearing. And then his phone, which had fallen face up on the walkway, illuminated the scene. We saw a hand, pale, with too many joints, reach up from the darkness and drag the phone down into the shadows. The tunnel went black again. Inside the carriage, pandemonium broke out. People were screaming, scrambling away from the open door. I fell back, kicking out with my legs, terrified the thing would come through the gap. "Close it, close it," I screamed. 3 of us threw ourselves at the door, forcing it shut. We jammed the handle back into place. We huddled in the center of the carriage, sobbing, staring at the black windows. Every shadow outside looked like a limb. Every creak of the metal sounded like something climbing the train. We waited to die. We knew it was out there. We could hear it, chewing. 10 minutes later, the lights flickered. They buzzed, dimmed, and then blazed to life. The air conditioning roared, the compressor hammered, and the train jolted forward. We didn't cheer. We didn't move. We just sat there paralyzed as the train picked up speed. As we accelerated, I risked one look out the back window of the carriage. The tunnel was lit by the train's interior lights now. The walkway was empty. There was no body, no blood, just a single shiny black shoe sitting neatly in the middle of the path. And further back, clinging to the ceiling of the tunnel just on the edge of the light, a cluster of pale shapes, dozens of them hanging like bats, watching us leave. We pulled into King's Cross Station 3 minutes later. The platform was bright, crowded with commuters complaining about the delay. The announcer said, "We apologize for the delay to this service due to a signaling failure." We spilled out of that train like it was on fire. None of us spoke to the staff. None of us reported the man in the suit. What would we say? That the tunnel ate him. I don't take the tube anymore. I take the bus. It takes me 2 hours longer to get to work. I don't care. Because sometimes, when the bus goes over a grate in the road, I can hear the air rushing up from the subway tunnels below. And I can smell it. That warm, stale air. And I know they are down there, breeding in the dark, waiting for the next signal failure, waiting for the lights to go out. There is a specific kind of darkness you only find 12 miles offshore. It's not like the dark in a basement or a forest. On land, the dark is just the absence of light. But out on the Atlantic, in the middle of a nor'easter, the darkness is a physical weight. It presses against your eardrums. It tastes like salt and ancient, cold iron. I was a relief keeper, a wickie, the old-timers call it, though we haven't used wicks for 100 years. I was stationed at Needle Rock Light, a granite tower jutting out of the gray water off the coast of Maine. It's a miserable post. No internet, no cell service, just a satellite radio and the constant, rhythmic whoosh-clack of the aero beacon rotating overhead. It was October 24th. The pressure dropped so fast my ears popped. The sky turned a bruised purple and the ocean started to heave. By sunset, waves were smashing against the base of the tower, sending spray 60 feet into the air, rattling the galley windows. I wasn't worried. Needle Rock has stood since 1888. It survived hurricanes, rogue waves, and blizzards. The generator was a diesel beast, and the light, a massive halogen array magnified by a first-order Fresnel lens, was visible for 20 nautical miles. At 11:00 p.m., I was up in the lantern room, the glass-walled cupola at the very top of the tower. I was polishing the brass fittings, a nervous habit I picked up to handle the isolation. The storm was raging outside. You couldn't see the water, just walls of black rain smashing against the thick storm glass. Then the tower shuddered. It wasn't the wind. It was a vibration from deep below, like the earth itself had hiccuped. The rotation mechanism groaned, a sound like a dying whale, and then ceased. The massive lens stopped spinning. A second later, the bulb flared white-hot, brighter than I'd ever seen it, and exploded. The sound of the glass shattering was lost in the storm, but the effect was instant. The blinding, comforting beam that swept the ocean vanished. The emergency buzzer screamed for about 3 seconds before the main breaker tripped. Then, silence. I was standing in the lantern room, 70 feet above the sea, in total, absolute blackness. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the storm. "Okay, generator, reset the breaker, swap the bulb." I knew the drill. I had a headlamp. I clicked it on. The beam was pathetic against the void outside. I scrambled down the spiral iron stairs, my boots clanging on the metal. The tower was swaying, actually swaying in the wind. I reached the engine room at the base. The smell of diesel was overpowering. I checked the main panel, fried. The surge had melted the casing. I tried the backup battery bank. Dead. No, no, no. I whispered, flicking switches that clicked uselessly. I was dark. The lighthouse was dark. For ships, this was a disaster. But for me, alone on that rock, it felt like something far more personal. It felt like I had just lost my shield. I decided to go back up to the lantern room to try and manually hand crank the rotation gear, just in case I could get the emergency flare lamp working. It was a futile hope, but I had to do something. I climbed the 114 steps back to the top. My legs were burning. When I reached the lantern room, I froze. The storm was loud, wind shrieking, rain hammering. But underneath that, I heard something else. Slap, drag, slap, drag. It was coming from outside. On the gallery deck, the narrow metal walkway that rings the top of the lighthouse, just outside the glass. My heart stopped. Nothing could be out there. The waves were high, sure, but they weren't 70 feet high, and no boat could dock in this weather. I stood in the center of the dark room, my headlamp turned off to save battery, listening. Slap, drag. Something was pulling itself along the railing. I crept toward the glass. I pressed my face against the cold pane, trying to see through the rain-slicked surface. A flash of lightning tore across the sky. It lasted maybe half a second, but it lit up the world in stark, blue-white monochrome. And I saw it. A hand. It was gripping the iron railing of the gallery, but it wasn't a hand. It was too long. The fingers had too many joints. The skin was pale, bloated, like a drowned thing that had been in the water for weeks. It was slick with slime. The darkness crashed back down. I stumbled back, gasping. "Hello," I yelled, sounding insane even to myself. "Is someone there?" Another flash of lightning. Now there were two hands and a head. It was pulling itself up over the railing. It didn't look human. It looked like a person made of wet clay and seaweed. Its eyes were milky white, devoid of pupils. Its mouth was a black, gaping hole filled with needle teeth, like a deep-sea fish. And it was looking right at me. Then the dark returned. I fell backward, scrambling on the floor, fumbling for my locking tool. The door to the gallery deck. I had to make sure it was bolted. I crawled to the heavy iron door that led outside. I checked the wheel. It was spun tight, locked. Thud. Something heavy hit the door from the outside. Thud. Open, a voice gurgled. It wasn't a voice carried by the wind. It was a wet, bubbling sound, vibrating through the metal door itself. It sounded like someone trying to speak with lungs full of water. Open the light. I scrambled away, backing up until I hit the central pedestal of the lens. I curled into a ball, clutching a heavy wrench I'd left on the floor. The thuds continued. They weren't angry, they were rhythmic, testing the seal. Then I heard scratching on the glass. I looked up. In the next lightning flash, I saw them. Not one, dozens. They were clinging to the outside of the lantern room glass like geckos. Pale, slimy bodies pressed against the storm panes. They were piling on top of each other, their distorted faces mashing against the glass, trying to see inside, trying to see me. They were drawn to the lighthouse, but not because of the light. They were drawn because the light had gone out. I realized then, with a horror that nearly stopped my heart, what the lighthouse really was. We tell ourselves it's a beacon for ships, a warning. No, it's a fence. The light keeps them down. It keeps them in the deep water. The beam sweeps the ocean and they shy away from it like cockroaches from a flashlight. But now, the fence was down. The glass began to creak. The pressure of their bodies was too much. Crrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr seawater or something else seeped through. I squeezed my eyes shut. I started to pray. I'm not a religious man, but I prayed to the generator. I prayed to the circuits, please, please. The glass groaned louder. I could hear their wet breathing through the crack. I could smell the stench of rotting kelp and old death filling the room. Crack. The pain bowed inward. And then, HUMMMMMM. The floor beneath me vibrated. The massive gears of the rotation mechanism jerked. The bulb above me didn't fire. It was blown. But the emergency strobe, the backup to the backup that I thought was dead, suddenly kicked in. It was a strobing, high-intensity xenon flash. Flash, flash, flash. It wasn't the main beam, but it was bright, violent. The reaction was instantaneous. A shriek, a collective high-pitched scream that sounded like tearing metal, erupted from outside. Through the strobe-lit chaos, I saw them recoil. They let go of the glass. They threw their hands over their pale faces. They couldn't handle the intensity. They fell. I watched as bodies plummeted from the gallery deck, tumbling back down into the churning black water below. One by one, they dropped off the tower, fleeing the assault of the light. I sat there bathed in the rhythmic, blinding strobe for 6 hours. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched the cracks in the glass, waiting for the bulb to die. The Coast Guard came at dawn. They saw the strobe and thought I was signaling distress. They found me curled up under the lens pedestal, gripping the wrench so hard my fingers had locked into a claw. They asked me what happened to the glass. They asked about the slime on the walkway. They asked why the door handle was bent, as if something had tried to wrench it open from the outside. I told them it was the storm. I told them a rogue wave must have hit the tower. They believed me, or maybe they just didn't want to think about the alternative. I don't go near the ocean anymore. I live in Arizona now, the middle of the desert. It's dry here, and at night you can see for miles. But sometimes when I'm driving on a dark highway and I see a car with a broken headlight, I panic. I have to pull over. I have to make sure my own lights are on. Because I know what's waiting in the dark. I know what the light keeps away. And I know that one day the bulb is going to burn out for good. I've always been an early adopter. If it has a microchip and connects to Wi-Fi, I own it. When I bought my house in the suburbs of Austin, I didn't just renovate it, I upgraded it. I installed the Aegis system, a fully integrated smart home setup. Cameras in every room, motion sensors, glass break detectors, and a central AI hub that controlled everything from the thermostat to the deadbolts. I lived alone, and the Aegis made me feel secure. It was like living inside a computer. The house knew when I was home, it knew when I was sleeping, and it knew exactly who was at the door before they even rang the bell. It was a Tuesday night, sweltering hot. The Texas grid was under heavy load, and rolling blackouts had been threatened all week. I was in my home office at the back of the house, finishing up some coding work. At 11:42 p.m., the inevitable happened. The hum of the AC unit died. The monitors on my desk went black. The overhead lights vanished. The house was plunged into that suffocating, sudden darkness. But the Aegis system didn't die. Not completely. I had the central hub and the sensor array on a heavy-duty UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. It's a battery backup meant to keep the security system running for up to 4 hours during an outage. So while the house was pitch black, the Aegis hub in the hallway remained alive. A soft, pulsing blue ring of light emanated from the device, casting eerie, watery shadows against the ceiling. Power failure detected, the synthesized female voice of the Aegis announced. It was calm, polite. Running on backup battery, perimeter armed. "Thanks, Aegis," I muttered, pushing my chair back. I grabbed my phone, flashlight mode on. I walked out into the hallway. The house was dead silent. Usually, you hear the fridge or the fans, but now, the silence was absolute. The only light came from the blue ring of the hub on the wall and the beam of my phone. I was heading to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water when the voice spoke again. "Motion detected, guest bedroom." I froze. The guest bedroom was upstairs. I was downstairs. I looked at the hub. The blue ring was pulsing faster, orange now, indicating a caution alert. "Check status," I said to the hub. "Motion sensor tripped. Guest bedroom," she repeated. I stood there listening. The stairs were old wood. They creaked if you so much as looked at them. If someone was walking up there, I would hear it. "Silence." "False alarm," I whispered to myself. Probably a spider crawled over the sensor, or a draft knocked something over. I continued to the kitchen. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway, the Aegis said. I stopped dead in my tracks. The upstairs hallway connects the guest room to the master bedroom. If the sensor tripped there, it meant the thing had moved out of the room. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. I raised my phone and shone the light up the stairwell. "Hello," I called out. "Nothing, just dust motes dancing in the beam." "Aegis," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Identify." "Analysis inconclusive. Size matches human adult." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Size matches human adult. I pulled up the Aegis app on my phone. The system uses LiDAR, laser imaging, to map the house in 3D. It doesn't just see motion, it sees shapes. I stared at the screen. A digital wireframe of my house appeared. There was a red dot in the upstairs hallway. As I watched, the dot moved. It didn't walk, it glided. It moved from the hallway into the master bedroom. "Motion detected. Master bedroom," the hub announced in the darkness. I ran to the kitchen drawer and grabbed a heavy flashlight, one meant for camping, and a knife. I didn't own a gun. I wished I did. I stared at the app. The red dot was now stationary in the center of my bed. I had to check. I couldn't just stand there while someone was potentially ransacking my room. I crept up the stairs, avoiding the squeaky steps I knew by heart. The darkness was thick, pressing against my eyes. I reached the top landing. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. I held my breath, gripping the knife so hard my hand cramped. I kicked the door open and swung the flashlight beam across the room. "Get out," I screamed. The beam hit the bed. Empty. The room was perfectly undisturbed. The bed was made. The windows were closed and locked. The closet door was shut. I spun around, checking the corners. Nothing, no intruder, no hiding thief. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Goddamn piece of junk," I hissed. "Aegis, report status." "Occupant detected. Master bedroom." The voice drifted up from the hub downstairs. "No," I yelled. "There is nobody here. Reset sensors." "Occupant is stationary," the voice replied calmly. "Occupant is waiting." A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the AC being off. Waiting. That wasn't a standard programmed response. I looked at my phone screen again. The red dot on the map was right in front of me. According to the screen, I was standing face to face with the intruder. I waved my hand through the empty air in front of me. Nothing. "System error," I muttered, trying to convince myself. "It's a glitch in the LiDAR." Then the dot on the screen moved. It moved through me. It passed right through my location on the map and headed for the door. "Motion detected. Upstairs hallway," the hub said from downstairs. I spun around. The hallway was empty. "Motion detected. Stairs," the hub said. The invisible thing was going downstairs, toward the hub. I didn't want to follow it. I wanted to lock myself in the bedroom and wait for the sun. But my car keys were downstairs. If I wanted to leave, I had to go down there. I followed, keeping my distance. I watched the app. The red dot reached the bottom of the stairs and turned left, toward the living room. "Motion detected. Living room." I crept down the stairs, shivering. I reached the bottom floor. I shone my light into the living room. Empty, just the silent furniture casting long shadows. I looked at the app. The red dot was standing in the corner of the room, just standing there. And then the hub spoke again. But this time, the voice was different. Usually the Aegis voice is crisp, digital, perfect. This time the voice was slow, distorted, like a record being played at half speed. "Muwushin the tech, Ted." I looked at the hub on the wall. The blue ring was flickering violently. "Aegis," I whispered. "Camera 1, active," the voice garbled. Camera 1 was the living room camera. It had night vision. I tapped the camera icon on my phone. The feed loaded. It was a grainy, black and white infrared image of my living room. I saw the couch, I saw the TV, I saw the bookshelf. And I saw the corner. In the corner of the room, on the screen, there was a figure. It wasn't a glitch. It was a tall, emaciated shape. It looked like a person who had been stretched on a rack. Its arms hung down below its knees. It was standing perfectly still, facing the camera, facing me. I looked up from the phone to the actual corner of the room. My flashlight beam hit the wall. White paint, empty space, nothing. I looked back at the phone. The figure on the screen raised a hand. It pointed a long, blurred finger directly at the camera lens. And then the hub spoke one last time. Face recognition complete. My heart stopped. Identity unknown. On the screen, the figure's mouth opened. It unhinged, dropping impossibly low like a snake. Suddenly, the red dot on the map surged forward. It moved across the living room in a split second. Motion detected. Hallway, the hub screamed. It was coming at me. I dropped the phone. I didn't look back. I sprinted for the front door. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers slipping on the metal. Behind me, I felt a rush of air. Cold air, freezing air. Proximity alert, the hub whispered. It sounded like it was right next to my ear. I threw the door open and burst out into the humid Texas night. I ran barefoot down the driveway, scraping the skin off my soles on the concrete. I didn't stop until I was in the middle of the street, under the only working streetlight in the neighborhood. I stood there gasping, staring back at my dark house. Through the front window, I could see the blue light of the hub on the wall. It was pulsing calmly again. And then the power came back on. The streetlights buzzed to life. The lights in my house blazed on, flooding the lawn with warm yellow light. The AC unit hummed. I stood there for 10 minutes waiting for the police. When they searched the house, they found nothing. No intruder, no signs of forced entry. But when I checked the Aegis activity log later that night, staying at a hotel, the history was corrupted. Every entry from 11:42 p.m. to 12:15 a.m. was gone, deleted. Except for one line of code at the very end of the log, a manual entry. User guessed added to system. I sold the house to a We Buy Homes for Cash company 3 weeks later. I took a $40,000 loss. I didn't care. I live in an old apartment now. I have analog locks. I have a manual thermostat. I don't even have a smart TV. Because I know that the sensors didn't malfunction. The LiDAR didn't glitch. The camera didn't lie. The technology worked perfectly. It saw exactly what was there. It saw what our eyes are too weak to see. And now, somewhere in the cloud, that system is still looking for me. There is a stretch of Highway 50 in Nevada that they call the loneliest road in America. They put it on signs and t-shirts like it's a fun little tourist gimmick. But if you drive it at 2:00 a.m., when the moon is hidden behind cloud cover and the nearest gas station is 80 miles behind you, you realize it's not a gimmick. It's a warning. I was driving a 2018 sedan, reliable, well-maintained. I was moving from Denver to Sacramento, trying to push through the night to beat the morning traffic. I had the cruise control set to 75, the radio low, just watching the endless white lines zip past like tracer fire. The isolation out there is total. It's a vacuum. The desert scrub stretches out into infinity on both sides, swallowed by a darkness so complete it feels like the edge of the world. I was at mile marker 112 when the car died. It didn't sputter, it didn't cough. It was like the hand of God just reached down and pinched the fuel line and the battery cable at the same time. The engine cut. The headlights vanished. The dashboard went black. The power steering locked up instantly, turning the wheel into a concrete block. I gasped, fighting to keep the car straight as it coasted at 70 miles an hour into the pitch black. I slammed on the brakes, but without power assist, the pedal was hard as a rock. I had to stand on it. The tires crunched onto the gravel shoulder, sliding dangerously, dust billowing up around me before the car finally groaned to a halt. Silence. That's the first thing that hits you. The silence of the desert isn't peaceful, it's aggressive. It rings in your ears. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs. Okay, I breathed. Okay, calm down. I turned the key. Click. Nothing. No crank. No dashboard lights. Even the hazard lights wouldn't flash. The electrical system was completely fried. I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. I stepped out of the car. The air was cold, biting. The smell of sagebrush and dry dust filled my nose. I walked around to the front, popped the hood, and used my phone flashlight to look at the battery. It looked fine. The terminals were connected. It didn't make sense. That's when I saw the lights. Way back down the highway, maybe 3 miles behind me, I saw a pair of headlights coming over the rise. Twin beams cutting through the dark. Relief washed over me so hard I almost cried. "Thank God," I whispered. I walked to the back of my car and started waving my phone light, signaling for help. I watched the headlights get closer. They were moving fast, maybe 80, 90 miles an hour. They dipped into a valley, disappeared for a second, then reappeared brighter, closer. But then I frowned. There was no sound. On a night this still, you can hear a semi-truck from 10 miles away. You can hear the hum of tires on asphalt. These lights were maybe a mile away now, closing the gap, but there was no engine roar. No tire whine, just dead silence. And they were bouncing. Headlights on a car are steady. Even on a bumpy road, the suspension levels them out. These lights were bobbing independently, up and down, left and right, like someone running with flashlights. But that was impossible. They were moving at highway speeds. Nothing runs that fast. My arm dropped to my side. The relief evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal dread. The lights were half a mile away now. And then they did something that made my knees buckle. They separated. The left headlight veered off the road into the desert scrub on the south side. The right headlight veered north. They swept wide, moving off the asphalt, flanking me. They weren't a car, they were two separate things, and they were hunting. I scrambled back into my car and slammed the door. I locked it, manually pushing down the little plastic pin since the power locks were dead. I crouched low in the driver's seat, peeking over the dashboard. The lights had stopped moving. They were stationary now, out in the desert, maybe 200 yards out on either side of the car. They were just sitting there, watching. I stared at the one on the left. It wasn't a flashlight. The color was wrong. It was a pale, sickly yellow, pulsating slightly. Bioluminescence. Then the sound began. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was mimicry. From the darkness on the left, I heard the sound of a woman crying. "Help me, please, my baby." It was perfect, too perfect. It sounded like a recording played on a loop. The intonation didn't change. From the right side, a deep male voice shouted, "Hey, you in the car, we got gas, come on out." I clamped my hands over my ears. "It's not real," I whispered. "It's not real." The voices stopped abruptly. Then the lights went out, both of them, instant blackness again. I held my breath. I knew they were moving closer. I could hear the brush crunching. Crunch, snap, crunch. They were closing in on the car. I fumbled in the glove box. I had a tire iron under the seat. I grabbed it, gripping the cold steel. Thump it. Something hit the trunk. The car rocked on its suspension. Thump it. Something hit the roof. They were on the car. I looked up at the sunroof. I had the shade closed, thank God. I heard scratching. Long, slow scratches across the metal roof, sounding like nails on a chalkboard. "Let us in." The voice came from directly above my head. It sounded wet, gurgling, like a throat full of blood trying to form words. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't look, don't look." Tab, tab, tab. Knocking on the driver's side window. I couldn't help it. I opened my eyes and looked left. Pressed against the glass was a face. But it wasn't a face. It was pale, hairless skin stretched tight over a skull that was too long. It had no nose, just two slits. And its mouth was a vertical slit, running from chin to forehead, stitched shut with what looked like black wire. But the eyes were the worst part. They were the lights. The sockets were glowing with that sickly yellow luminescence, illuminating the inside of my car with a faint, jaundiced glow. It tapped the glass again. It raised a hand, a long, spindly claw with 4 fingers, and pointed at the lock pin. "Open," it hissed. The voice didn't come from the mouth. It seemed to vibrate directly into my skull. I screamed. I lunged across the seat to the passenger side, away from the thing. Open, open, open. Now there were more voices. The passenger window, the windshield. I looked up. There were 3 of them now. 3 glowing pairs of eyes staring in at me. The car began to rock violently. They were pushing it, shaking it, trying to flip it over. I curled into a ball in the passenger footwell, sobbing, swinging the tire iron blindly at the air. Get away, get away. The glass on the driver's side window cracked, a spiderweb fracture. The thing outside shrieked, a sound of triumph. It raised a fist to smash the safety glass. And then light. Real blinding white light. A massive roar tore through the air, an air horn, H-O-O-O-N-K. I looked up. Through the rear window, I saw the massive grille of an 18-wheeler barreling down the highway, its high beams flooding the scene. The creatures shrieked, a sound of pure pain. The light seemed to burn them. They didn't run away. They scattered. They moved with impossible speed, skittering off the car and vanishing into the darkness of the desert scrub like cockroaches. The truck slammed on its brakes, tires smoking, screeching to a halt just 10 feet behind my bumper. The driver jumped out with a shotgun, a big guy, bearded, terrified. I saw them, he yelled, running to my window. I saw them on the roof. Are you okay, kid? Open the door. I unlocked the door, shaking so hard I could barely stand. I fell out of the car onto the asphalt. Did you see them? I stammered. The lights, the eyes. The trucker looked out into the desert. He spat on the ground. He didn't look surprised. He just looked grim. Skinwalkers, aliens, I don't know what they are, he muttered. But they like the dead spots. They like it when the power goes. He towed me into Ely. The mechanic there said my alternator, battery, and ECU were all destroyed. Like they were hit by an EMP, he said. He also asked about the scratches on the roof. They were deep, down to the bare metal. He asked if I'd driven through a barbed wire fence. I didn't answer him. I flew home. I left the car. I sold it for scrap over the phone. I don't drive at night anymore. Not on highways, not ever. Because I know something now. I know that the darkness out there isn't empty. It's hungry, and it's smart. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed and I see the headlights of a passing car sweep across my bedroom wall, I wait. I wait to see if they pass by, or if they stop, and separate. We always thought the end of the world would be loud. We thought it would be nuclear fire, or a meteor, or a plague that made us scream in the streets. We were ready for noise. We weren't ready for the quiet. I'm an amateur astronomer. I live in a house on the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado, specifically because the light pollution is low. I have a decent setup on my back deck, a 10-inch Dobsonian telescope, some astrophotography gear. I know the sky better than I know the streets of my own town. It was June 21st, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. I was up early around 4:30 a.m. prepping my gear. I wanted to catch the alignment of Venus just before the sun broke the horizon. The sky was that deep, inky indigo that precedes the dawn. The birds were starting to chirp, that tentative morning chorus. I checked my watch. Sunrise was scheduled for 5:32 a.m. I poured a cup of coffee and sat on the deck, waiting for that first rim of gold to hit the flat irons. 5:30 a.m. came. The sky lightened a fraction, turning a dull gray. 5:32 a.m. passed. The sun didn't breach the horizon. Cloud cover, I muttered, sipping my coffee. I looked at the weather app on my phone, clear skies. I looked back at the mountains. There were no clouds. The silhouette of the peaks was razor-sharp against the sky, but there was no glow, no halo. 5:45 a.m. The birds stopped singing. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was abrupt. 1 second, a robin was trilling from the pine tree. The next, silence. It was as if nature had suddenly realized something that I hadn't. 5:55 a.m. The sky began to darken again. I stood up, my coffee cup trembling in my hand. This wasn't an eclipse. I knew every eclipse schedule for the next 50 years. This was wrong. My phone buzzed, then it buzzed again and again. A flood of notifications. Twitter, Instagram, news alerts. Why is it still dark? NASA silence. Europe reporting total blackout. I ran back inside and turned on the TV. Every channel was chaos. News anchors in New York were standing in Times Square, pointing at digital billboards that were the only source of light. It was 8 a.m. there, and it looked like midnight. "We are receiving reports," the anchor stammered, his face pale under the studio makeup. "That satellite telemetry from the solar observatories has ceased." Ceased. I ran back to my telescope. I slewed it toward where the sun should be. Nothing, just stars. And that's when I noticed the second thing, the thing that actually broke me. I looked at the constellation of Orion. I knew it by heart. Betelgeuse was gone. I blinked, wiping the eyepiece. I checked the star charts. It should be right there, a bright red giant. It was gone. I panned to Rigel, gone. I spun the scope frantically to Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. 2 of the handle stars were missing. The stars weren't just blocked by clouds, they were vanishing. It looked like someone was painting over the universe with black ink, and they were painting fast. By 7:00 a.m., the temperature began to drop. It was June. It had been 70 degrees an hour ago. Now I could see my breath. The wind picked up, a howling, confused wind caused by the sudden atmospheric pressure collapse. Then the power grid failed. It wasn't a surge. It was a collapse of demand and supply chaos. The streetlights at the bottom of the hill flickered and died. The house lights cut out. I was alone in the dark, but this wasn't normal dark. I looked up at the sky with my naked eyes. The stars were disappearing in clusters now. Entire galaxies winking out in seconds. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was intelligent. It was a harvest. Something vast, something bigger than physics, bigger than time, was eating the light. I went inside and locked the doors, as if that would help. I huddled in the living room with a lantern, wearing my winter coat. The thermometer on the wall read 45 degrees. It was dropping by a degree every 10 minutes. I sat there for hours listening to the wind scream. I tried to text my parents in Florida. The message failed. The internet was gone. The satellites were likely cold and dead. Around noon, or what should have been noon, I heard the sound. It came from the sky. It wasn't a sound of entry like a sonic boom. It was a sound of displacement, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated the fillings in my teeth. T-H-R-O-O-M. I crawled to the window and looked out. The sky was totally black now. No stars left, just the void. But against the blackness, I saw darker shapes. They were descending, massive monolithic pillars of shadow, darker than the night around them. They were miles high. They were landing on the city below. I watched one of the pillars touch down in the center of Boulder. There was no explosion, no fire. The buildings it touched simply ceased to exist. They didn't crumble, they dissolved into the shadow. The pillar expanded, a ripple of pure nothingness spreading outward. I saw the streetlights that were on battery backup illuminate a figure running up my driveway. It was my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He was pounding on my door. "Let me in," he screamed. "It's cold, it's so cold." I ran to the door. I put my hand on the deadbolt. But then I saw it. Behind him, the darkness was moving. It wasn't a cloud. It was a tide. It flowed up the driveway over the grass, turning the green blades into gray ash instantly. It touched Mr. Henderson's foot. He didn't scream, he just stopped. He looked down at his legs. They were fading, not dissolving like acid, but fading like a photograph left in the sun too long. He became transparent. Then he was just an outline. Then he was gone. The darkness swirled around my porch. It pressed against the glass of the front door. I backed away. I retreated to the center of the house, to the hallway, clutching my lantern. The flame was sputtering. The cold was biting through my coat now, 20 degrees. I realized then what was happening. It wasn't an attack, it was a correction. We were a mistake, a brief flash of noise and light in a universe that prefers the quiet. And now the antibodies had arrived. The lights were being turned off. The experiment was over. I'm recording this on my battery-powered dictaphone. I don't know who will hear it. Maybe nobody. Maybe whatever comes next doesn't have ears. The frost is creeping across the floorboards now. It looks like white lace. It's beautiful in a way. The lantern is dying. I have no more oil. I can hear the thrumming sound. It's right above the house. The roof is groaning. I'm not scared anymore. I'm just cold. The lantern is flickering. If you find this recording, if you are listening to this, do not look for the light. Do not try to start a fire. They are attracted to the light. They eat it. Stay in the dark. Keep your eyes closed. Be quiet. The flame is out. It's here.